Good day, ladies. CX Queen.
Hi.
So nice to have
Hello.
you here, Esther, Mandisa. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me. I know you've
Thank
been
you for having
to
us.
work and all of that, right? Cool. So we'll start with you, Esther. Just introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then we'll go to Mandisa.
Okay. So as you know, my name is Esther Ofosuhene. I'm also known as Ghana's Queen of CX. So I'm a CX enthusiast and I'm a CXpreneur, as you already know.
Yeah.
In my main work stream, I'm the head of customer experience for GHL Bank. It's the foremost bank for wealth creation and is the market leader in mortgages in Ghana.
Right.
In my second life, I drive customer experience in Ghana. I'm pushing to get the first ever certified customer experience institution or body in Ghana.
Nice.
Currently, what I do is I'm a convener of customer experience professionals Ghana on LinkedIn, where we share ideas and work on how to actualize our dream of creating a customer experience professional organization in Ghana. So basically, that is it for me.
Nice. Mandisa.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Mandisa Makubalo here, based in Cape Town in the township of Guguletu, which means our pride.
Wow.
It is down in South Africa and it's 3 o'clock this time. I think it's just after 3 o'clock, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So Mandisa Makubalo is a CX evangelist or CX advocate. I breathe CX. I own a CX management consulting firm, which is based in Cape Town, South Africa. And we focus on the entire spectrum of customer experience management through to user experience design and the change management that comes as a result of the CX initiatives. I'm very passionate about resuscitating township economy. I fully believe that there's an economy in the townships that hasn't been served, that is also underestimated. And I'm trying to position myself as the go-to person for these large organizations when they want to integrate into the townships. So if a bank is looking to set up in the township or a retailer, so I want to be that go-to person for them to help them design the CX for the township. Because sometimes what you find is that these organizations will apply the same principles that are applied in the cities to the townships, and it's a different market altogether. So I'm really quite passionate about that. I am the very first CX consulting 100% Black owned in South Africa. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm also part of the CXPA Cape Town network, where we meet on a quarterly basis to share case studies and to just help one another, support one another in our journeys as CX professionals, and to really create an awareness about CX in South Africa and Cape Town. And outside of that, I spend a lot of time with the youth. I'm passionate about developing the youth. It's part of me giving back, where I engage the youth on topics such as professionalism, just helping them to have a seamless transition from being a student or a scholar into being an employee, and to help them make the right choices about their careers, and also just to just really engage them on problem solving and critical thinking. So that's something I do outside of everything else that I do, is I'm always invited to speak to the youth, guest speak at different events, just to really challenge them and awaken what's been sleeping inside of them. So and I'm a mom to a 21-year-old.
22.
So that's
I can't wait to get there. Mine is just 9 and I'm pulling my hair. Good stuff. So we'll start with Esther, really. Can you tell us, just fill us in on what's happening in CX in Ghana during the pandemic? I mean, you have a vast experience beyond the banking sector where you work. Can you share what the state of customer experience is now in Ghana?
Yes, Debs. Well, it's been quite a challenge managing customer experience during this pandemic period. But it is amazing how organizations in Ghana have actually risen to the occasion, driving digital and improving user experience on all the digital platforms.
Mm-hmm.
The exciting part is actually the government of Ghana has been the champion in this drive from
Right.
day one. So, for example, hospitals are now using e-consults. So you don't need to go to the hospital if you don't have to. You
Oh,
can
wow.
engage a doctor online, and then yes, it's just amazing. Financial institutions have all prorated their digital platforms. So I'm talking about mobile money transfers for
Mhm.
free. Internet banking charges have been dropped.
Wow.
Mobile app charges have been dropped so that it will ease transfer of money and purchase of goods digitally.
Hmm.
This is something the Bank of Ghana has pushed, and the banking institution in Ghana is pushing to ensure that customers have ease in doing all these things,
Transacting.
transactions and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
amidst this pandemic, yes. Also, the government has ensured that there are digital payments available for utilities. So you
Mm-hmm.
can pay your water bill via mobile money. You can buy electricity through mobile money or the app. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, we don't even need to pay for water because for the next 3 months, the
It's
president
free.
has announced that no water bill. Yay!
Wow. What can I move to
So
Ghana for 3 months?
yeah, I mean, look, our president is amazing.
Oh,
That's
The
wow.
vice president
amazing,
is
eh?
driving digital. And what touched me the most is how Ghanaian entrepreneurs and companies have gone out of their way to support the needy and the homeless in Ghana,
Wow.
giving them food, water, accommodation during this pandemic. It's heartwarming. And
Wow.
also, let's not leave out our military, the people who protect us. For the first time, they are not only protecting us, they are helping us clean our cities.
Hmm.
So because everybody is home during the lockdown, the military have been tasked to clean the marketplaces, to clean the townships of filth. So by the time this pandemic is over, Ghana is going to be one of
That's
the
clean.
cleanest cities in Africa, thanks
Oh,
to our
wow.
military.
Oh, wow. That's
So these are just
amazing.
a few of the things that we are doing
Yeah.
amidst this pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
That's
amazing.
amazing. I mean, we have similar things going on in Nigeria as well. We have people in the public private sector standing up to the occasion, donations happening. I know we have in the SME space, so we have this government granted loans to small business owners. One of them is called Trader Money, and quite a number of them. So what the government has done is they've suspended repayment on loans for like 3 months, and so even though there's a lockdown, they have kind of curated, you know, um, household items, food and supply. So we
Yeah,
have designated
yeah,
markets across different
yeah.
areas. For the states where I'm in, they are very, very, in fact, I've never seen a government communicate like that before since I've been born. For 43 years I've lived.
It's
There's
amazing.
so much information that the state is putting out on Instagram. Every single
Yeah,
thing going on, they report
yeah,
themselves. I think it's been
yeah,
super amazing.
yeah.
Mandisa, do you
I
want to
think
share what's happening in Cape Town in South Africa?
I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of what is happening this side, more from the government perspective. I mean, I must applaud Ghana government for the
Yeah.
no payment of water. I mean, that's really, really very helpful. We haven't gone that far yet, but I know that there's a lot of support in terms of food provision that's being made for families that are earning less than 3,600 Rand a month. So there's a toll-free number that they can phone where they would be provided with a food package.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of initiatives from government to support small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the 4 major banks have recently announced a bond relief during the lockdown. And obviously there's terms and conditions attached to that, but there's a release that's being granted to those that have bonds. I've also seen a lot of networks coming up in terms of entrepreneurs mobilizing themselves to help one another and support one another.
Yeah.
You know, people are coming up with different things that they have been doing. Someone spoke around the fact that, you know, everybody's spending a lot of money right now on data for such calls that we are having today, and how one must just not forget to keep every receipt so that one can claim back from the revenue services.
Yeah.
And some guys are sharing information around the tech tools that they have found to work for themselves, and how to create a routine for yourself at home whilst you have kids, and how that looks like and what has worked for me. So there's a lot of groups that are coming together right now, just sharing insights, just helping one another. I think because everybody is across the globe, I think I said this to you in one of our conversations, that the playing fields have been leveled right now, and we are all facing the same challenges.
Yeah.
So we are all learning as and when things are happening. And you see people coming out and saying, I want to share, I want to help. We've seen sponsorships from these very gigantic companies that have the budget to do so.
Yeah.
Like they've given the one bank, Time Bank owner, Mr. Petrus Mutsepe, donated just over R1 billion towards fighting COVID-19. There's 3 other rich, wealthy families that have also just sponsored just over R1 billion to fight COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of mobilization, regardless of the negativity around COVID-19 that one sees in the news. There's a lot of unity that is being brought in a way as a result of what we confronted with. I think from a business perspective, yesterday I saw an interesting article that listed about 10 industries in South Africa, and then it was looking at the impact from a personnel perspective, from a supply chain perspective, from an operations perspective, and revenue. And what was frightening for me to see is the impact on the transport, hospitality, and travel industry. That the severity of the impact across all of them, the personnel, supply chain, operations, revenue, it is so severe. You know, I have clients that run guest houses that can occupy up to 200 people. And speaking to them, they're telling me they've had to shut down their organizations, their establishments, because of the pandemic. You know, they don't have guests coming in, and they've stocked up on all these food items. What do they do? What do they do? How do you move a guest house into an online platform? You know, you really cannot. And if you're in the tourism space, you are used to driving tourists around Cape Town. How do you move transportation of tourists into an online platform? So it was scary for me to see the impact for the travel and hospitality and transportation industry. And then you have your energy and resources, where the impact on the supply chain and operations is huge, but they are still able to make some revenue. I was looking at colleges and universities. The impact in terms of personnel is quite big. Minimal impact on supply chain, because there isn't really a supply chain in colleges and universities. But from an operations perspective, the impact is quite severe. But even so, they are still able to get some revenue. And then if you look at the banking and the financial services, it's a whole different picture altogether. If you look at manufacturing, the impact is severe on that side. So it was quite a frightening picture to see. I mean, I looked at it yesterday, and then you start thinking, then how do you help those industries with an understanding of CX, and how that can be used to maybe try and minimize the impact on those areas.
Yeah. So the next question will go to Esther, really. What do you think the focus is now for businesses in Ghana during the pandemic? Is it to acquire new customers, or is the focus on retaining the customers that you already have?
Okay. I think for the Ghanaian market, what we're doing is actually to ensure that customers know we care in this time of the pandemic. I think this time is not the time that the Ghanaian market is looking to make a lot of profit. What the Ghanaian market is doing is to ensure that customers are giving back to. And that is why, for example, all digital platforms are consistently up during this period, and not only for my bank, but across board.
Yeah.
All the digital transactions charges have been prorated. The mobile money transactions up and down, the amount to transactional amounts have been increased so that you can get more access to your money if you can't go to the ATM.
Yeah.
One other thing is most companies are using their digital platforms, maybe their social media platforms, as a form of educating.
Yeah.
Some banks are using it to educate. Some banks are using it as a cooking. So they are using their social media pages to teach people how to cook, easy cooking using limited whatever during this pandemic lockdown. So I have seen a trend where the customer experience is tilting to the fact that we are saying we care.
Right.
You've given to us, you've paid our charges, you've paid your mortgages, you've paid all of these things. It is time for us to show you what we can give back to you as a customer. And that is the most interesting part of what we are seeing in Ghana when it comes to how we are managing the CX in this pandemic period.
Yes, yes. I think that's amazing. We have brands that have done similar things. So it's similar in Nigeria as well. What I've seen is a trend where the focus is not on getting new customers, is on showing that you care. So you have a company, one of the big banks in Nigeria, built a 100 bed isolation center and handed it over, fully kitted, and handed it over to Lagos State government. I've seen internet service providers upgrade customers to higher plans at no extra cost. You know, and the mobile network that I use, so they send me a message saying that my monthly, I'm a postpaid, if I use a prepaid service, but that my monthly data plan will be renewed at no cost to me. They won't shut me out. You understand?
Yeah.
So I think it's similar. Is it the same thing in South Africa as well, Mandisa?
It's similar, and I will add a few things. So I think with the banking industry, you'll probably find synergies across all continents.
Yeah.
Where, like I made an example during our conversation the other day that the one bank what they've done is that when you draw funds at a foreign ATM, they don't charge you additional fees that they would normally charge you. So they've stabilized the fee, and they charge you what they would charge you at their own ATM, so that you can still get your funds at any other bank. But before, you used to get charged for using a foreign bank. So that's the one thing. What I've also seen, I saw something today. So one of our big food retailers, which is the ShopRite Group, they have introduced a food trailer. So it's the same setup as a store, but it's a mobile store that is built at the back of a truck, and they've used containers. I think they've put 3 containers together, and there's a staircase, and those mobile food stores are in the townships, so that people don't have to go into, because there's too much traffic right now in the shopping centers. So they've positioned them in those townships that are quite, where there's high density in terms of your people. And that's a beautiful initiative, a beautiful program.
Yeah, so they're taking the market
as much
to the people.
To the people, yeah.
Yes. And they also realize, it shows that they are really in tune with the customer's needs right now, because there's an immediate need for food. Yeah. There's an immediate need to get your bread, your milk, and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic business strategy, though some people have their own opinion about that, but I think it's got the customer in mind. And I also I like what Esther said at the beginning, that the companies are more about I think it's something I also mentioned in our previous conversations, that companies have always been focused on finding and winning customers, but there's been minimal investments made on keeping customers. So what I'm seeing right now, there's an effort to find ways to keep customers. And I think if you push that retention of customers up front as your key focus, you are guaranteed to get the financial benefits that comes with that. But if one is going to focus on the financial benefits at the expense of customer retention, then it's a very bad strategy. So I also remember
Agreed.
saying that companies cannot afford to be commercial about things at such a time where people are losing their families. There's the numbers we see daily. Those are people's lives that have been lost. So as much as there's a need to make money as a business, you cannot neglect the humanity that is needed at this time in how you're doing business.
Yeah.
So there's a definite shift and a heightened awareness around emotions in the way things are being done. It's not like it was before, where the focus is about pushing transactions and getting business.
Yeah.
But there's an awareness that is there that hasn't been there before around the emotions.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing,
You
though,
know,
because
that's
I hear this repeatedly from everyone who I've spoken to. So is it a wrong thing to cross-sell at this point to a customer?
Oh, well, I don't think it's wrong to cross-sell. For us, like for GHL Bank, we are cross-selling our digital channels
Right.
because most people are used to walking in branch to transact.
Yes.
Now is the opportunity to cross-sell digital channels to our customers. And the good thing is because there are no charges on it. Currently, we've removed all the charges on it. It's a good opportunity to cross-sell. So this is a positive cross-sell you are cross-selling to the customer, not an add-on to a lot of other things. So yes, you can cross-sell, but it depends on exactly what it is you are cross-selling. That is what makes it.
yes, I agree with you
So
fully.
what about upselling? Because so here's the thing. If I am a particular user, right? Let me use my data, for example. I have been on, say, 5 gig, right? Now, this is the pandemic. If this service provider has noticed that people are likely to buy higher plans, so if I'm on 5 gig, they want to take me up to 15 gig. That's like upselling. So is that wrong at this time, especially when you're now upselling and rewarding me at the same time? So if I was on 5 gig and I was spending, say, 2,000 or $30 or whatever it is, now you're trying to get me to stay connected 247 by going up to 15 gig, but pay 50% of that cost. Like, what's your take on upselling now? Is it upselling at full price, upselling at a discounted price? Yes, Mandisa.
So I hear you when you say that it's upselling, but I think the way in which, and what I like about that type of approach is that the service providers monitor your behavior as a customer. So it's a proactive way to also help you. So if I'm every single day on Zoom calls and I use a lot of data every single day, so they've been studying my behavior over the last couple of days or weeks or since the pandemic. And it's a way to help me and make things. So if I've been buying data every single day and I'm not on a contract perhaps, so them upselling me into a contract, it's in a way of trying to mitigate what might potentially happen to me. And it's a way of them really being so in tune with my behavior as a customer. In that what they're offering to me is in line with what they have seen from a behavior perspective. So if you look at it in that sense, I really don't see anything wrong with that. Like what Esther said now also is that before what you had customers that would browse online but go and shop offline. So they will browse on your website. They will go and shop at the store. So now you have a change in behavior in that they are browsing online and shopping online. And there's a nice opportunity, you know, that now you've moved from the brick and mortar. Now people are browsing online to buy online. Unlike before where they browse online and they'll go and buy offline. So that is something simultaneous that's just been happening spontaneously because of what we are confronted with. But the upselling really depends. If it's to help the customer achieve their goals and it's with the customer in mind, then there's a win-win for both the organization and the customer.
I agree, because bottom line is about the customer. So if what would help the customer achieve their goal is cross-selling or upselling, bottom line is that there's a need that you like a customer's need that you want. And I think that's amazing. Right. So two more questions I have before we
Exactly.
wrap this up. The next question I have is, what do you think is the downside of customer experience? Just one thing you think is the downside of customer experience that the pandemic has thrown out into the light?
For me, downside of the pandemic, I wouldn't say it's a downside, actually. I
Okay.
think it's opportunities that we have picked up on.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So for customer experience, you can see that now we know, how do I put it? There are a lot of opportunities. Now we know that the world is indeed going digital.
Yeah.
So as customer experience, you have to drive or to try and push your institution to go digital. So you recommend a chief digital officer for the institution. You recommend a lot of customer engagement on the digital level and all of that. Also, one thing opportunity I picked up on is empowering the frontline staff. It's an area that we need to focus on. It's an opportunity we have to ensure that institutions understand. We use this pandemic as a case study to let the institutions know the importance of having a frontline. Because once you're going digital, the call centers are also key.
Yeah.
So now institutions or companies that don't have call centers are the ones who are losing in this pandemic. Once you have a call center and the frontline is highly empowered, they can do everything, increase transactional limits, decrease transactional limits for banking and all of that. You don't need to go to the banking hall.
Yeah.
Because they can do everything from the comfort of their home as a customer because of the frontliners. That is another thing. And then I realized that another thing for customer experience is employee experience. There's an opportunity there to drive employee experience where now we are aware that we can actually telecommute. We don't need to be in the office.
Yeah, I know, right?
That is one thing, an opportunity that has come out.
Yes.
From this pandemic, employee experience, how best we can ensure that our staff will experience something good after the pandemic is over. So they can work 2 days in the office, the other days at home and all of that. So that is the opportunities I have seen. So I'm not seeing it as a downside. I'm seeing it as an opportunity we can use to drive CX in all angles.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So my next question before we just get final thoughts from both of them. This goes to Mandisa. So Mandisa.
Can I? Okay. Yes.
Mandisa recently.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
No. Oh no, go ahead. You want to say something? It's fine. I can get what you want.
No. It's okay. It's okay.
So Mandisa has been for a while been very. I mean, we've been talking a lot offline. That's a good thing about the World Wide Web. You can connect with everybody in the world and we catch up, So she recently launched an article and she's been very focused on, while we are pushing surviving during the pandemic, what happens after the pandemic. So she's been, she has an excellent article out on how business can begin to think about continuity after the pandemic. So Mandisa, do you want to just basically share your thoughts briefly on what you think businesses should start to look at as we plan? Because, I mean, we're like halfway in, we're believing that the numbers will begin to drop, but how do businesses begin to plan for their customers after the pandemic? Can you talk a bit about that continuity plan?
Okay, so it's something that's been very heavy on my spirit, as you would remember in our conversations.
Yeah.
I also think that it talks to the opportunities that the pandemic has presented, because I think seeing that we are on 21-day lockdown as a country, the behavior displayed in week 1 of the lockdown, it's enough for any organization to start putting together a continuity plan. Even if it's 5 days worth of data, there's enough information available that you can use to make assumptions about what's going to happen. And I think because what we are dealing with as a globe, there's a lot of emotions attached to it. People tend to focus on the health implications of the pandemic more than the financial implications of the pandemic. So my goal is to really awaken organizations and small businesses to the fact that as much as there's a requirement to focus on the health implications of the pandemic, but I think there's something that someone said in one article I read is that the pandemic is going to bankrupt more organizations than it's going to kill people. And that statement I found to be very profound.
Yeah.
It's a very profound
That's
statement.
true.
And we're not being insensitive to the lives that are being lost when I say that. I say that with utmost respect, because you can never attach value to people's lives. But I do agree with the fact that it's going to bankrupt. So what I talk about in my article is, and I liked that Esther mentioned the employee experience, because as much as we're pushing customer experience, we need to understand that some of these industries, they need people in an active manner for them to be able to continue their businesses. And I had one person today telling me that she's received an email yesterday about a pay cut. You know, they're not gonna pay them their full salaries. And then how do you expect that individual to drive a customer experience when they are so concerned about the impact on their family, and the husband is not working? She's the sole breadwinner at home. So how do you expect them to drive customer experience when the employee experience has been broken? You know, so that's something that, as I always say, that with us,
how do you now manage that? Because it's this is the thing, right? How do you now manage that kind of employee experience? Because the business can choose to, it's either the reality is there's no business, right? And depending on the business model, how do you stay open? Do you let people go, or do you keep what you have and cut the salaries? Like it's a, you know, how do you marry that with the employee experience? How do you manage that? It's difficult.
I think what needs to happen is that through communication, organizations can prepare employees, and they need to be transparent about what's going on. I think there's no transparency about what is going on. So what happens is that people are hit with this heartbreaking news about cuts in salaries and all of that. But if there's a level of transparency and continuous communication from organizations about the impact, you know, of the pandemic on the organization itself, it prepares people for what might happen. But organizations would keep quiet for very long, only to slap people with this communication. But and you can never prepare people for telling them that you're going to lose your job. But I think it eases the pain and the impact to a degree when you are being transparent that, guys, our balance sheet is not looking okay. We are struggling. I know one organization, a big retailer, recently published in the news that they have had to make a decision not to pay suppliers in order to pay their employees. But now here's the question. You're not paying your suppliers could mean that you're not getting any supply from them, which will ultimately lead to closure of your organization. So it must have been a very hard decision to make, to decide whether to pay employees or pay suppliers.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I think here's the thing, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Esther, but I think that the brands that had very poor employee experience are the ones before the pandemic, are the ones that their staff will highly likely feel really broken and detached if there are any layoffs or any reductions in salary. What do you think, Esther?
Well, this is a very sensitive topic. And I find most of the time the people I've spoken to, the executives, the owners of certain companies, the MDs, you can see that it's very sensitive discussion to have with them. The truth of the matter is, you are right. The company that already has a good existing employee experience is likely to manage this easily, or not easily, but to manage it much better than a company that struggled with employee experience. So for instance, I think we are all human, we are all intelligent. At a point in time, we are all aware that it's going to end up in a certain way. And then we are all also aware that depending on your role, you might go or you might stay. It's the reality. Okay. So most at times people are expecting it. The challenge here is, what is the change management put in place by an institution to manage the employees' expectations of what is about to happen? And from me, I think the onus does not only lie on the company, it also lies on the people, the staff. Because you, as a person, you don't want it to happen, but you know that once the company is struggling, it will happen.
Yeah.
And so you psych yourself for the worst and pray for the best in this.
Yeah.
But yes, you are right. A company that thrives on employee experience already would manage this situation much better.
Yeah.
Because currently MDs and executives are really bashing their heads, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
I know some institutions that have clearly come out and said, look, if these things don't change in the next 3 months, we'll go bankrupt. We can't continue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
but it's sad, but yes, that is where we are. You are right. If the experience is good previously for employees, it's easier to manage them in this time. Yeah.
Mandisa, let's come back to you. Sorry we took that off.
Can I? Okay, no problem. So some of the things that I talk about in the article is around, as much as there's a need to do business impact analysis, I fully believe that there must be a customer impact analysis and an employee impact analysis.
Absolutely.
And if you start with the employee impact analysis, it will, when you invest in the impact employee analysis and use what comes out of that to the best of your ability, it will help drive the customer impact, which will in turn drive the revenue for the business. So it's got to start with the employee, and then what you do from that perspective will influence and will affect the customer impact, which in turn will drive the revenue and what comes into the business and the retention and all of those things, minimize your churn, customer churn, and all of those things. And then secondly, what I also spoke about is that there's a critical need for one to focus. It is so easy to lose focus. And what you will find is that if one loses focus, you might also end up losing the identity of your business, because you're trying so many things. This one says do that, do that, do that. And then you end up finding that you've shifted from your core purpose as an organization. You know, you're operating outside of where you should be operating because you're putting things in place. And as much as I am all about digitalizing things, I believe that you can't just get there by just digitalizing things. You've got to understand the customer goals. Are you digitizing to solve problems? Are you digitizing to solve an end-to-end journey? Because if you're going to make an investment in terms of digitalizing things, it's got to be to solve a problem. It's got to be around understanding the customer goals, and it's got to be to solve an end-to-end journey. So before putting in a budget to go digital and all of those things, you still need to invest and understand all of those things so that it can be sustainable. But if you're going to digitalize an environment without looking at the customer goals, the customer problems you are solving, and the end-to-end journey, you might find that at the end of the pandemic, there's so much cleaning up to be done, and you've lost so much money. You know, so and that goes back to the focus I was talking about. And also I spoke about the 3 types of authority in the article, that there's an opportunity for organizations and small businesses to leverage off the authority that they have. And I talk about the positional authority. So you need to understand people in the industry that you are operating in, whose authority you can leverage on to drive continuity, you know, and to build and to put contingencies in place. There's borrowed authority, where you can borrow someone's authority in an industry that will help you to drive the continuity that is needed to be driven for the organization. And then there's the earned authority, you know, where you have done so much in the industry that you've earned the authority that you have, and people want to listen to you, they care about you. How do you leverage that authority at such a time as this, as a business owner or as an organization? Because some organizations have earned authority already. There's nothing for them to worry about. Some organizations might have not earned, but they can look at the strategic partners and see whose authority can we borrow at a time as this.
Yeah.
So think outside of the organization. Don't only limit your thinking to your immediate surroundings, but it's really, I even make an analogy of driving the car, and I'm saying that this is the time for you to use your rear view mirror and your side mirrors, which will give you a view to the outside world. We are driving in a fog, and to those guys that are bold enough to drive in this fog, it's not the time for you to accelerate or speed. It's the time for you to really pay attention, because you've got passengers in their vehicle, and those passengers are your customers, are your employees, your stakeholders, and you have a responsibility to take them safely on the journey. So that's how I end the article, because it's really not about you. As much as you are driving the vehicle, you are in control, but you have a responsibility to this entire ecosystem that you have. So don't be narrow-minded in your thinking as an organization.
Yeah. I think that's the key. I would share it with you, Esther, when we're done.
Good. I'd like to read it.
Is that okay, Mandisa? I share with her?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Thanks, Mandisa.
Excellent. So let's just wrap up with it. I mean, just have any tips you have, one tip, one idea for businesses, on how they can retain customers or care for customers during the pandemic. What would be the one thing that you would say, Esther?
Okay, so for me, I'll just do 3 bullet points. The first one is to show kindness by eliminating fear, by providing peace of mind for both employees and your customers. That is one thing you have to do. Number 2 is to extend grace. We know that there are agreements, there are policies, but in this time, this difficult time, we have to look at things through a new lens and prepare to give exceptions to people, moratoriums if they need it, because you have to earn your place in people's hearts, minds, and memories. The last one is we have to become unforgettable as an institution.
Yeah.
Look, customers in this time, when everything is over, customers are going to remember if your brand was kind to them, if your brand was trustworthy, if your brand was helpful during this pandemic time. And they will make decisions based on that, whether to stay or to go.
Yeah.
So the decisions you make as an organization can affect, the decisions you make as an organization today during this pandemic can affect your customer base and your bottom line tomorrow after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so CX is very important. We need to keep that in mind as organizations.
Mandisa, what are your final words on how, just a tip or how businesses?
I'm sitting here and I'm laughing because the last statement that Esther mentioned, it's something that's very close to my heart, and I actually wanted to share that. Okay. So how customers will remember you after this pandemic is very critical. Yeah. I think something that I also mentioned in the article around the fact that the unfortunate part is that some organizations are not going to make it till the end of the pandemic. Some will make it. And I've seen some organizations, like mostly the small businesses that don't have the cash flow to sustain them, that have resorted to unethical practices and doing things behind, as much as you think it's for the customer, but what you're doing today, the integrity on your business and the long-term effects of you doing such unethical practices, it's going to cost you. So don't fall into the trap, no matter how much money you think you need.
Yeah.
Don't fall into the trap of resorting into unethical practices just because you are concerned about your cash flow and your finances. It's really not the time to think about that. And I'm saying this with all due respect. I know that we all need money. I also need money right now, but it doesn't mean that I have to resort to doing things unethically.
Yeah,
that's very important.
That's true.
What I like, there's something that Bishop T.D. Jakes said in one of his sermons the other day, that when someone was asking him his view on the pandemic, he was saying that what he knows that the pandemic has done, it's to awaken people, it's to awaken the church. So what I think the pandemic has done, it's awakened organizations to realize that they need the customer. It's always been about the business. It's always been about the business and little about the customer. So what I think the pandemic has done, it is to awaken companies to the realization that they need customers. Without the customer, there is no business.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
that
there's
is
an
true.
awakening that has taken place.
Yeah.
And as CX professionals, that is what we should be leveraging off, you
Yeah.
know, for organizations that have never felt, you know, I remember some head of CX and head of departments were saying in the one training program is that they are trying to understand how to get buy-in from Exco around CX and get the budgets they need to drive CX. They are challenged with organizational adoption of CX.
Yeah, I can attest to
But
that fact.
believe you
Yeah.
me, I believe that after the pandemic, the tables are going to turn. I really believe that.
But here's my worry though, Mandisa, because the truth is, I have spoken to a few professionals, within this time frame, and they're still struggling. And I'll tell you why. They're struggling because for some reason, we as professionals, some of us are very fixed on the CX blueprint. It has to be a certain way, right? And I know people now who have had to lecture that, look, throw your CX metrics out the window. This is not the time for you to maintain a CX dashboard. You're tracking CSAT, NPA, like let all of that go. Yes, your report, your CSAT now is that. So I may choose not to buy again, not because I'm unhappy, but because I have prioritized my light bill, more money on food over a lot of money on airtime. It might just be what is important to me at the moment. It doesn't mean that I'm not loyal to your brand or I'm not satisfied with your product or service. So I think I'm spending a bit of time doing this online, and I have a free webinar coming up next week where I want to talk about how to manage mapping customer journey during the pandemic. Like, we need to adapt. We have not fully adapted. For those of us who are very on the CX competence, one of the better word, we are so fixed on it that we have closed our eyes to the reality of what's going on. That's the truth. So, because honestly, I think this is the best thing that could have happened to CX, this pandemic. It's the best thing.
Yes.
How to use the opportunity.
And I'm actually reminded of a chat that we both had, Debbie.
Yeah.
About the fact that there's a lack of practicality when it comes to CX. Yeah. There's methodologies, there's competency frameworks, there's everything, but the practicality is missing. And I remember when one of the heads, I remember when one of the heads of CX, with all due respect to Esther, what I said to them is that if they are struggling with the adoption or getting the buy-in, so when the Exco says that, or they need to get buy-in from Exco, my thing was that I think it's a different conversation altogether. If Exco is saying that if you are struggling with getting the buy-in of Exco, and they need justification, financial justification as to why they must invest in CX, then I think the conversation is a completely different conversation. It means that the organization, in terms of the CX maturity, it's not where it should be.
Yeah,
I agree.
So then you start wasting your time in trying to get their buy-in, but you focus on the culture. And that culture shift and change and investing in that will help in getting them to really understand. But when they're saying that they need justification for them to financially invest, it means that the organization isn't as customer-centric as it should be.
Yeah.
Well,
then you are looking at a different conversations altogether.
Yeah. To add to what Mandisa is saying, you see, what I normally do is I put myself in the shoes of the decision makers, the executive level. Every businessman is looking at the bottom line. And immediately CX in your organization is seen as a cost center, you have a problem on your hands. Then you will keep justifying and keep justifying and justifying. Change will always have to come from the top.
Yeah.
If the executive level is not buying into your CX, then there's something wrong. And that's what I always tell my CX colleagues, or when I'm having my strategy sessions with companies. I always say that, look, CX equals a stronger bottom line. It's as simple as that. That is the only way we can get the decision makers to appreciate customer experience. To them, customer experience is just cost.
Yeah.
So once you're able to equate customer experience to the bottom line, that customers equals your bottom line. Customer is happy, business goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And the in-betweens, then you've done a good job. But until we are able, as CX people, until we are able to do that equation, there will always be a challenge of justifying. So to me, I always say CX is not a cost center. It's a revenue generation center, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
We don't just go and map customer journeys because of the fun of it. Because if the customer is happy and all the pain points are addressed, they will stay, they'll remain loyal, they'll do business.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bottom line goes up.
Yeah.
And then we have profits and we have gains. So that is how we are slowly, or I am slowly trying to position CX to most companies in Ghana. So that they'll get the buy-in, and then it will be easier for them to, because currently, even in Ghana, most CX professionals are not on executive level because they don't see the need for it as companies. And that is one thing I'm pushing on changing, that every institution should have a champion at the top. Even if it's not a chief customer officer or a chief experience officer, there should be a champion. The CEO can champion it. The COO can champion it if they want to. But they should have a sponsor, a representation at the top. That is the only way they can be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Really, all the dashboards and the competencies don't mean nothing to these businessmen.
Exactly.
What they want is the bottom line. It's the bottom line, and it is the bottom line that we have to push. Yeah. It's true.
In fact, when I started, I didn't lead with anything that would take on any cost. So my approach was very simple. How can I influence with what I have available? It required me to do stuff manually. I spent extra hours, but when I did the work and I had the results and I showed the results, it was easy to make a case to now invest in a solution that would help me achieve more. So I agree with you 110%, Queen of CX Ghana, for that. Thank you so much, ladies. We should do this again and again.
Yes.
It's been amazing.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot from you and Mandisa. Thank you.
Same here from you guys.